mentioned the Proteas, but the other national team, or the only national team who have delivered world championships to these shores, the Springboks started their Northern Hemisphere Autumn Series against the Scottish, coming through in that one as 32-15 winners, Chuck. When you think back to the game and you look at the scoreline, was it as impressive as the scoreline suggests?
No, the scoreline was very flattering of the Boks. I think the Scottish brought it to us. It was tough going in there, and I think the rotated side had their hands full basically. And there were a couple of names who put their hands up in terms of they're trying to stem the tide in terms of the pressure. Number one, trying to get the points on the board. But all in all, man, I think the scoreboard isn't a fair reflection, and some of the fans in the stadium will feel hard done by because there's a disallowed try. There's a yellow card which seemed a bit harsh. So the Scottish weren't particularly happy with that result because I think they think that they could have squeezed a little bit more from that game. And ultimately, 32-15 seems a bit harsh on them. But from the approach's perspective, I think, Jay, we did well enough to get over the line. And sometimes that's what you need to do. Grind these results out because we haven't been played in a while compared to our opponents. So I'll take that, but not really satisfied.
Yeah, it was a rusty performance from the Springboks, right? And indicative of the fact that they haven't played together in a little while. So the game itself, particularly that first half, was very stop-starty. And partly it's the rust, but also where the rust then showed up is in the handling errors. There were just too many handling errors from the Springboks in particular. And the game never really got any momentum. You looked up and, okay, the Proteas had scored a try. And then when you follow the game, because of that stop-start nature and maybe some ill-discipline from the Springboks, the Scottish were allowed to be in the game in terms of being able to convert their penalties. They didn't really get a sniff at the try line, so that was very impressive from the Springboks. Any time the Scottish were in the Springboks 22, they were able to defend the try line, and as I'm saying, it wasn't particularly close from the Scottish in terms of are they going to get over the line, and you got a sense that yes, they're kicking their goal kicks and they're staying close. But they do need to score some tries. And they did try go through the middle. It didn't work. They tried to go wide. It didn't work. Every single time they tried to find Duan on the wing, it was an errant pass from the Scottish. And on their side, I was very impressed by the captain, to Pulopu. I think that's how you say his name. Very impressive in the number 12 jumper. And you start wondering now for the Lions series that is coming, where you would have put your house on Bundiaki being the starting center, right? But now you wonder, is it maybe the Scottish player? And also disappointing, as you mentioned, from Scotland's side, is the red card that they got. Yeah, that was questionable, and for the first time in these internationals, we saw that a red card doesn't really involve a player being out the player is out for the entirety of the game, but the team is not down to 14 men for the rest of the game. You're able to bring on the sub. So we saw that play out for the first time. I don't know how I feel about that, Chuck. I think if you're gonna get a red card, if there's gonna be a deficit, it has to be for the entirety of the game. And some of the red cards are not weighted equally. In some instances where there's absolute dangerous play that is uncalled for, I think that happened in the Fiji match against Wales.
Yeah,
you should get the punishment of not being able to get up to 15 for the rest of the game. But coming back to the Springboks match, you know how is it Iron Man who says we have a Hulk?
Yes.
Yeah, you know how Iron Man says we have a Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
With the Springboks, we have a scrum. It does not matter how poorly the Springboks play or how average they are. We have the scrum that we can go to, and we won that game on the back of the scrum, because when we did get into that set piece, you just knew what was coming. There was no question about rust. There was no question about when else did you play together. There were no questions at all around the scrum. You get into the scrum, we feed the ball, we're scrumming for a penalty, and we're doing as we please. And this is something that we're able to go to in any international match. Whether we were on top and we're purring and the scrum sets up what we do in terms of the rest of our play where we are on top, or if we do need to wrestle some momentum our way, or we need to stop the bleeding, we know we can go to the scrum. Famously in the World Cup, of course, we remember how Willemse called for a scrum in his zone 22, which the rule has since been changed for the Springboks. But we know we've got that in our back pocket, and it was needed, it was necessary in the game against the Scottish, because once again that set up the win for us.
You know, when you speak about that, yeah, we had, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 13 handling errors. And it's sad if you're Scotland, if there are so many handling errors and you can't capitalize because off the back of a ball lost forward, it's a scrum. And you're like, did it really benefit from that call because then we're going to get out muscled in the scrum? And then when you think about the game in general, Jay, just saying stop-start nature, there was moments of excellence, right? Like Pollard cross kick to Mapimpi, try, and like, okay, more of that. Then you don't see it for a while, and that disappears. But I mean, of the much changed side, Jay, there were people who put their hands up in terms of putting through a very decent performance for the green and gold. Mapimpi, I don't know if I can call him a bit part player. Maybe he is at this point because he came out with a statement saying that he doesn't think he makes it to the next World Cup because he can see that his powers are waning. He's not the same player he was. I hope he does because in this game he showed that there's still much Mapimpi left
is 34
in the tank. Yeah,
and I'm a bit confused by that. Like I don't know why I didn't know how old really Mapimpi is, because when he was speaking about maybe not making it to the next World Cup, I was just thinking about the fact that I'm not part of the frontline players. You know, when everyone is fit and available and it's a big game, you're getting Cheslin on the one wing, and on the other wing you would be getting
Kurtley Arendse.
Mm-hmm. But then I looked up his age because he mentioned that as well. It's like, oh, Mapimpi is currently 34, and come the next World Cup he'll be 37. So the likelihood of having a 37-year-old winger at the World Cup is not very high. But he continues to produce when he's given the opportunities, eh?
Yeah, I mean, when we did firmly move in the direction of Cheslin Colby and Kurtley Arendse, he did look like the inferior player on the wing in terms of I'd rather have those two. But since that, I think there's been a rebirth. Like a phoenix, Makazole Mapimpi has been performing every time he's been selected, and I think that brace of tries. First it was Pollard, then it was Uveli Leroux with that kick as well. Real good reading of the game, attacking the space, and then once he sees the try line, no one is strong enough to stop him. So I think it would be sad to not see him in the World Cup. But if he does make it, because I know if you are 37J and you make it to the World Cup, it's because the team is pinning their hopes on you, and that's not the case, unfortunately, for Mapimpi, because we've got options. But that's what Springboks are at this point.
Chuck, if you don't see him at the World Cup, the man has been to 2 World Cups.
True.
He's won gold medals at those World Cups, and the first of those, he was the first South African player to score a try in the final of a Rugby World Cup. So he's had a storied career in the green and gold. Like, it feels like it's been short, but 46 tests, not everyone will get to that, and he'll probably go past the 50 test mark. And when it's all said and done, he'll likely sit number 2 on the all-time try scoring list. So you look at his career, you think about his story where he's not supposed to be here. You know, for him to have come up relatively late to international level, but then to have made the most of it as he has, it's satisfactory for me. I don't know about him. I think he might say the same thing. But like, as I'm saying, when you do consider the fact that he was already like a little older when he came into the Springbok setup, and then what he has been able to do when you weigh that up against his background, I wouldn't be sad if I don't see him at the next World Cup. I think the sadness, maybe this is what you're describing, comes from the fact that we have grown attached to these players, you know, because since Rassie came in, and the project which he initially started with Ninaba, and now he's continuing with his set of coaches, Nabo Stick. There's just something different around the Springboks team that holds stronger together, and like Siya Kolisi being the captain and what he represents, and how they've ingratiated themselves to the South African rugby loving community and those who are on the fringes of that community. And you do identify with these players from also seeing them on Chasing the Sun. So I think when you speak about it was sad not to see him, it's not just at the World Cup. It's the thoughts of these group of players moving away, you know, because Rassie was on the record talking about that it might be hard even for someone like Eben Etzebeth to be at the next World Cup, because that core, you're talking about, these guys are going to be 34, 35, 36, 37, you know, and the likelihood of all of them being at the World Cup when you're trying to three-peat is not very high. So it's going to be interesting what happens between now and then. But we I think we need to ready ourselves to start saying goodbye to these guys. You mentioned Ville Leroux, who what a genius.
Yeah.
What a genius, what vision. Like, you look at that, it's like, man, that's like Paul Scholes or Tony Kroos on a rugby field, you know? Like, Mapimpi is not even like in, it doesn't look like he's even in his eye line, but he knows where he is, and he's kicking him into space, and he leads him there with the kick for the try. He's approaching 100 tests. He's gonna get to that mark, and we're gonna have to bid him goodbye as well. You
Yeah.
know, so we've had a good group of players.